Therefore, Avidehi, please explain Anga Sutta Goswami Manaha, mind, Anukulam, favorable to our mentality, Prabhashashi, you do speak, Bhagavata, the great devotee, Pradhanaha, the chief, Yad Aha, what he spoke, Vyavyashikare, Sukadeva Goswami, Atmavidya, transcendental knowledge, Visharada, expert, Nipatyam, unto the king, Sadhu, very good, Krishna, being asked. Translation for by His Divine Grace. Esi Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Ki. Translation, O Sutta Goswami, your words are pleasing to our minds. Please therefore explain this to us as it was spoken by the great devotee Sukadeva Goswami, who is very expert in transcendental knowledge and who spoke to Maharaj Pariksit upon being asked. Very short purport here. Quote, knowledge explained by the previous acharyas like Sukadeva Goswami and followed by the next like Sutta Goswami is always powerful, transcendental knowledge and is therefore penetrating and useful to all submissive students. Om Agyam Janarandasya Janandana Silakaya Chakshayamritamena. Here, actually, in the very nice verse in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 14, in the first text, Krishna says this, again I shall declare to you this supreme wisdom, the best of all knowledge, knowing which all the sages had attained the supreme perfection. It's a nice verse in the Bhagavad Gita. Right, Srila Prabhupada, he explains in that purport that, after many lifetimes of spiritual or religious practice, one may actually be situated in pure transcendental knowledge and understand that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the ultimate goal of self-realization. So by such transcendental realization, one naturally becomes free from all material entanglement and one develops pure love for Krishna. So this knowledge, it descends from the spiritual world, from Krishna, and it can be received through this chain of disciplic succession. And it's considered by all spiritual authorities to be far superior, this knowledge received in disciplic succession, to all other processes of knowledge. So we all have this ultimate potential to taste and experience this divine love for Krishna, which is lying dormant in our hearts. So one of the practices to help us awaken this love is hearing from these sacred scriptures. Everyone loves to be entertained, don't they? People in general, they spend so much time and energy watching movies, watching TV, listening to music, reading newspapers, surfing the net. Imagine if people devoted that time and energy to hearing stories and teachings that offer enlightenment. So the Bhakti scriptures, we call this type of hearing Shravana, or dedicated quality time to reading sacred literatures. I heard Srila Prabhupada, even though he was very busy with his pharmaceutical business as a household, every night he would read for 2 hours Srimad Bhagavatam. He's setting the example. Of course, reading scriptures, reading the Vedic, but also hearing topics or lectures on spiritual topics from this. So Prabhupada mentions in Bhagavad Gita that if you're a philosophically minded person, you naturally want to know what's the origin of creation. You want to know in essence, who am I? Who is God? What's my ultimate purpose in life? What happens at the time of death? Why am I experiencing these dualities of happiness and distress? So following these bhakti teachings, as us devotees, we've come to realize that, trying to define this world, trying to understand and define this world using our flawed perception definitely isn't the best process for understanding reality. We learn that as humans, we can only possess partial knowledge. Why? Because we have these 4 defects. We make mistakes. The saying, to err is human. We're subject to illusion. We have defective perception, very limited ability to be able to see things with our material senses. And also, we have this cheating propensity, which means humans have a tendency to speculate, concoct, misinterpret, create theories of their own. So in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna tells us there's 2 types of knowledge. There's ascending knowledge and the descending knowledge. So ascending knowledge is knowledge coming from this world. In various cultures over time, different philosophical methods have been developed by thinkers to assist in understanding truth and knowledge and reality. We've got epistemology, theology, axiology, aesthetics. There's so many different processes of knowledge coming from this world, which has been created by the great thinkers of this world to try and understand truth and knowledge and reality. And this is called the ascending knowledge. Knowledge coming from this world. Knowledge coming up. So in our Bhakti tradition, we learn about another process of receiving knowledge. The descending process. The descending. It means knowledge passed down from the Supreme Source via His pure representatives, the bona fide spiritual masters. So what does that mean? What is this disciplic succession, this parampara? It means hearing from a bona fide guru, or one who has heard from a bona fide guru. And that master has heard from his master. And that master has heard from his spiritual master. In this way, if you go up and up and up, eventually you'll go back in history and time. You'll reach the original guru and spiritual master, which is Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead Himself. He's the original source of all knowledge. So this descending knowledge coming from the Supreme through this disciplic succession is just perfect and complete. And it is said to be the most perfect way of receiving knowledge. So Krishna also explains in Bhagavad Gita that this descending knowledge is called Raja Guhyam. Raja Guhyam means it's a very well kept secret. And the opening key to this great treasure house of wisdom is association with a bona fide spiritual master who's coming in this disciplic succession. So this is the process recommended for knowing the absolute truth. Just like If you want to become a doctor or a lawyer, there's a certain process you have to go through. You have to go to university, you have to study under the professors, you've got to pass your exams. So similarly in spiritual knowledge, there's also a process. One cannot simply understand it by mundane scholarship, mental speculation, or mere material intelligence. It is said that we can only really know something of the Supreme when it's explained and revealed to us by the Supreme, or those connected to the Supreme. So to help guide us on the right path and to help us, to educate us, the Supreme Lord and His representatives have given us these Vedic literatures. Sometimes the Vedas is called the timeless wisdom of India. You ever heard that saying? And it constitutes the largest mass of spiritual knowledge coming from the ancient world. Actually, the Vedic literatures are said to comprise 120,000 books. You can imagine, that's like a whole library of books. I mean, who has time to read a whole library of books? Everyone's so busy in their daily life. Of course, Krishna's given us, very conveniently given us, the Bhagavad Gita, which is the very essence of those 120,000 books. Which means we can just go to one book and we can get the essence. Very convenient. So according to authentic sources, where did this Vedas come from? It is said that this original spiritual knowledge was given at the beginning of creation. It was imparted by the Supreme Lord to Lord Brahma, the first created being in this material universe, some 2 billion years ago. So since then, it has descended from him to us today by this disciplic succession. And these Vedas contains all things that humans need to know for both their spiritual and material well-being. The Vedas teach how everyone can live comfortably and happily in this world, at the same time gradually attain perfection while moving progressively at one's own individual pace. Because not everyone's the same. Everyone has their own individual pace. So everyone can attain perfection while moving progressively at one's own individual pace, according to one's nature, one's commitment, and one's motivation. And of course, for those who are exclusively just seeking genuine spiritual insight, these Vedas, they supply everything necessary, all the knowledge, direction, nourishment to achieve life's precious goal. But these Vedic literatures also warn us. They warn us that if we simply if we speculate on this Vedic knowledge, if we add our own material logic and argument to these Vedic knowledge, what happens? It will become different and different and more different. Actually, Krishnadas Kaviraj, in his Chaitanya Charitamrita, he's addressing the impersonalists, actually. And he declared to them, "My dear misguided interpreters, why should you suggest such fallacious logic? That an interpretation can never be accepted as evidence if it opposes the principles of revealed scripture. For lying, defective perception, mistakes and cheating does not occur in the authorized sages." Then he said, but if you are indeed interested in logic and argument, kindly apply it to the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. If you do, You'll find it strikingly wonderful. Then he went on to say, impersons who depend upon their poor fund of knowledge and morbid speculative habits cannot penetrate into the mystery of this knowledge, where the supreme truth takes the form of a transcendental person, Lord Krishna. They're simply trying to enter the spiritual platform from the mundane material platform. They cannot do it. Krishna does not reveal himself to such persons. So therefore we're continually advised to try and understand these texts, this knowledge, in association of skilled Vedic academics, the Vaishnavacharyas, like Rupa Goswami, Sanatana Goswami, Srila Prabhupada. All these amazing acharyas coming under Disciplic Succession have written amazing elaborate commentaries on these ancient texts. And actually they've been specifically empowered by the Supreme Lord to enlighten us and elevate our consciousness and bless us with genuine spiritual understanding. Without their guidance, without proper guidance, you can pick up these books and try and read them, but you will not be able to grasp these very deep philosophical messages that so cleverly weave their way through the storylines. It is said that hearing from these Vedic literatures means immersing ourselves in a deep spiritual culture which is saturated with the highest knowledge. One of the symptoms of a person who is advancing in Krishna consciousness or spiritual life is that they want to hear more and more. They want to learn more and more. They want to know everything about the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They cannot hear enough about Krishna. They have this great, just like fire in its insatiable appetite for consuming wood. Similarly, a devotee who's advancing in spiritual life, they just want to hear these beautiful spiritual topics about Krishna. And these topics are so transcendental that they always remain ever fresh and new. Despite repeated readings, you can read the same stories, the same scriptures over and over again, and they never become stale or hackneyed. They always remain fresh and new. So this is the meaning of transcendental or spiritual. And we understand in our bhakti school that these topics about Krishna are transcendental and actually non-different to him. It means when one hears these topics, one actually directly penetrates into his presence and directly associates with him. And the effect of directly associating with Krishna is that one's heart and one's consciousness becomes completely purified. One's actually lifted. It's like an elevator that lifts one to the topmost stage of self-realization. Bhagavatam mentions that when one hears these wonderful topics and penetrates into the Lord's association, all one's material illusion is completely destroyed, and one develops great attachment for the Supreme Lord. One actually develops genuine love for the Supreme Lord. So this is explained in this verse. The effects, the benefits of hearing topics from these elevated souls like Sukadeva Goswami. And of course, in Bhagavad Gita explains that the devotees of the Lord, they derive the greatest pleasure and happiness in hearing, reading, discussing topics about Krishna. And as one deepens one's understanding of this knowledge, and one's devotion and dedication to the Supreme Lord begins to intensify, amazing realizations of this knowledge just start blossoming in the heart. Prabhupada mentions in one purport that, generally people in this world, they experience many, many complexities in their life. Why is that? Because they don't really have a clear idea about the meaning of life, what the purpose of the human form of life is. So these Vedic literatures given to us by the Vaishnava Acharyas offer us the ultimate conclusion about the goal of existence. Actually, the many great scholars have declared that these Vedic books, these books translated by Srila Prabhupada, are very special, actually. And it is said, they declare that these books will definitely occupy a very significant place in the intellectual, cultural, and spiritual life of modern man for a long time to come. So, of course, it's amazing. Srila Prabhupada, if a writer, an author, writes, 4 or 5 books in his whole life, he's considered to be a very accomplished scholar, writer. Srila Prabhupada wrote over 60 books. And, these books are, and it's recommended that every day we try and read. We try and sit down and read these books. At least try and read 1 hour a day, if you can, 2 hours. Or if you can't find 1 hour, just read for half an hour at one time and maybe half an hour another time, or 20 minutes 3 times. But it's amazing when you actually sit down and start reading these books, you can really feel the effect of these books. And as I said, reading these Vedic literatures is one way will help us to awaken as I said, everyone has this ultimate potential to experience this divine love of God. And so there's many different processes which we do, chanting the holy names, reading the sacred scriptures. In our Vedic tradition we learn to have a fulfilled heart. To really have a fulfilled heart is really true wealth. It means to completely satisfy this loving propensity that we have is really what spiritual practice is all about. Deep down, everyone has in their hearts, they have this normal and natural desire to experience the pleasure of true reciprocated love. The joy of loving and being loved. Unfortunately, in the modern world today, according to surveys, of course, countless people say and feel that they've never really truly felt that they've been loved. And many people have no idea what love really is, despite their deep longing for it. Love seems today in our modern busy world to have developed a too vague a meaning. So this is a frustration that burns in people's hearts. I want to love, I want to be loved, but it doesn't happen in a perfectly fulfilling way, in a perfectly satisfying way, despite my best efforts. The reality is that in material life, in material consciousness, when people are generally they're programmed and conditioned to live in the world and view the world in a self-centered, egocentric, competitive, exploitive, selfish way. Thinking life's all about me, simply how I can enjoy, how I can be happy. It's all about my enjoyment, my selfish pleasure, how I can use others to satisfy my desire, for my unlimited desire for material enjoyment. And what happens? Everything's spoiled. And Bhagavad Gita mentions it. It means that lust is governing people's lives rather than genuine love. And Bhagavad Gita, Krishna tells us that lust, it just burns like fire, never satisfied, and leads to total frustration and ultimate unhappiness. So in the Bhagavad Bhakti skill we learn that this lust for material enjoyment is only a perverted reflection of our heart's deepest longing to love and serve the Supreme Lord, who is the ultimate source of all love and joy. So in Bhakti Yoga we focus on transforming this lust into love, through purifying our consciousness and developing our natural love for Krishna and each other. And this love, it flows naturally out into the world in the form of genuine love, care and compassion and concern for the well-being of others. This is why when you learn to love Krishna, you can experience this great pleasure of being able to open your heart to everyone in a perfectly natural way. So we learn how our longing for love can only truly be satisfied by re-establishing our eternal loving relationship with Krishna. And of course, just developing this pure spiritual love, it's not just something that we learn from the movies and from the books we read as kids when the prince comes and rescues the princess and they ride happily off into the blue yonder to live happily ever after. Sometimes people think love is just some kind of feeling or emotion. But in our Bhakti Yoga we learn that this spiritual love is something to be learned. It's a great science. It's something to be learned, a great art with a theory to be mastered, then willfully put into practice. Okay, I'll just finish it. Does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask? I'll just read this verse again. Oh, where is it? O Sutta Goswami, your words are pleasing to our minds. Please therefore explain this to us as it was spoken by the great devotee Sukadeva Goswami, who is very expert in transcendental knowledge, and who spoke to Maharaj Pariksit upon being asked. Prabhupada explains here, knowledge explained by the previous acharyas like Sukadeva Goswami and followed by the next like Sutta Goswami is always powerful transcendental knowledge, and it is therefore penetrating and useful to all submissive students. Jai Srila Prabhupada ki, Srimad Bhagavatam ki.